If you're interested in what I look like in real life and want to learn more about me, then follow my Instagram page at Joe the Insomniak. I suffered from depression when I was in my 20s. I feel like nobody knew me and that I was very alone. To try and combat this, I used to take long walks on my own. I was trapped in my mind and that followed wherever I went. So one day, I was on one of these walks. I remembered seeing a fallen tree and having a weird urge to walk across it. I don't know what it was, but I had this really weird feeling. I still wanted to walk across it anyway. Just as I did so, I heard someone whisper stop. This terrifies me. I look around. No one. I have no idea what it is and I begin sprinting. As I do, I kick the front of the log and it falls downwards. At first I thought I was imagining it, but it actually fell into a deep ditch. It's not truly a ditch, but one that's formed by rocks that you sometimes find, but a massive 40 or 50 feet drop below. To this day, I still have no idea if somebody was there trying to save me. So, where I'm from, there's this huge stretch of forest preserve that sits in the middle of the city. It's surrounded mostly by sketchy lower-income neighbourhoods, but there's an entrance to it from where I grew up, which is a fairly good place to live. It's as far away from the city as you can get without being the suburbs, I guess. When I was about 11 or 12, my best friend at the time and I go exploring in the woods because it was a different and interesting landscape than all the sidewalks and school playgrounds and safe places we're used to. Now the preserve itself wasn't entirely wooded. There were big open lawn areas where people could barbecue in, and big hills where kids would sled in the winter. Now there's also a paved path that ran through part of it. But since we were dumb and trying to be rebellious, we always tried to stray as far from those areas as possible. Exploring the more deeply wooded areas, it might also be worth mentioning that about 10 years before we started going here, kids from one of the local high schools used these woods as a place to get drunk, until someone got stabbed. Then, 4 years earlier, a woman released 2 dangerous pit bulls in the woods because she couldn't take care of them and didn't want them to be put down. And they ended up mauling at least one person and attacking another one. So, knowing all of these things, we still decided it'd be a fine idea for 2 little white girls to just wander around this wooded landscape away from civilization for hours. We did this for almost a whole summer without a incident. Once we stumbled upon a lean-to-type shelter, but no one was home, so we just tried to stay away from that area. But one day we strayed a little further into the woods than we had intended. Things got creepy really quick. We had just been wandering around. We weren't really looking to go anywhere. I started hearing rustling in the ground away behind us. I didn't think too much of it, just thought it was an animal or something. And it didn't sound very frequent, so I didn't think much of it. Then, I suddenly heard something that sounded like a human voice. I froze, and my friend did too. We looked at each other and turned around to see that there's two boys probably our age a ways behind us. The two things that weirded me out at first are that we're not on a trail. We hadn't been anywhere near one in the last half hour, let's say. What's the chances that we'd see anyone wandering through the massive expanse of this forest? Immediately, I began thinking they're following us. The second thing that creeped me out was the appearance of the second boy. The first kid seemed normal enough, but his friend had a big head. I'm talking big. I noticed it from a distance. His head just like mushroomed up, as though he had something wrong with him or was wearing a mask. It's hard to tell. It's very unsettling to be confronted with this in the middle of nowhere. When my friend and I turned around to look at them, they saw us, but didn't acknowledge us. They just kept talking to each other, walking towards us through the trees. My friend and I are now thoroughly freaked out, deciding now would be a good time to try and head out of the woods. We couldn't turn around because we're afraid that would bring us closer. So we started heading west because we knew it'd eventually lead us to some kind of boundaries. We were making a pretty good pace really, weaving around stumps and around brambles and small shrubs and fallen trees. Every couple of minutes looking behind us to see that our new companions were slowly gaining on us. Now one time when I turned around, I saw the regular looking kid pointing at us, not saying a word. So even more freaked out, we tried to pick up the pace even more, going as quickly as we could without running. I think because we were scared, they started running too. Eventually, we began to see a clearing and a street with houses on it, and we frantically scrambled into it. But about 20 feet from us and freedom is a massive ditch, filled with what looks like a deep stream and countless numbers of large metal trash items. I'm talking like a washing machine, an old 50s style fridge, what appeared to be a rusting coat rack, stuff that you did not want to get cut on, and there's no visible waterline above. Our hearts sank when we saw the obstacles between us and perceived safety. We quickly decided the best idea is to travel along the side of the ditch until we found somewhere to cross. About 5 minutes later, with our friends travelling behind us, we're able to cross a fallen tree to the streets. I look at them while I'm crawling over, and they slow a little. It seems as though they've realised that they can't chase us now. Either way, we're back on the street, feeling safer, but they're still no more than 100 feet away from us. Neither of us had ever been to the neighbourhood we come out on before, but luckily my friend was a lot better with directions than I was, and was able to figure out the streets we needed to take to get home. We ran about 3 miles back to our neighbourhood, sprinting at first, then just jogged the whole way back once we were sure we weren't being followed anymore. We were terrified and it felt as though we were being chased for an hour. My name is John. I live in a rural part of Alabama, but chose to work in the city. The drive is about 45 minutes or so depending on traffic. However, by the time I pick my son up from the sitter, get dinner, and get home, I've been in the car for about 2 hours. My home is surrounded by trees, and the neighbours are few and far between. It can be lonely, but I love the privacy. One evening, I pulled in my driveway and noticed that something's off. The doors on my storage shed are wide open. I told my son to sit in the car as I go out to investigate. I didn't see anything missing, and closed the back doors. I know the wind had not blown them open because there's 2 latches, so you can't just open it. The following day, I look around and much to my dismay, 2 weed eaters along with other garden tools are missing. I know I should have contacted the police, but I know there wasn't much that I could do. And they weren't gonna help. So throughout the week, I had some off time and decided to tackle some yard work that I needed to get done, including cutting down a medium-sized tree that had grown next to my home. Once I cut it down, it took everything I had to move it to the edge of my property just inside the woods. I planned on cutting it off another day. Now fast forward the next week. It's Friday night and I left work at 7, picking up my son, arriving at home at 8:30. As I pull into my driveway, my son and I noticed somebody laying across it. It looked as though a tree branch had fallen across my driveway. As I drove up to it, I thought to myself that there are no trees over my driveway. Once I looked towards the base of my tree, my heart sank to the bottom of my stomach. It was the tree I'd cut down. I put it clear on the other side of my property until I could cut it up. I recognized the marking from my chainsaw. I didn't know what to do. My son and I sat there in silence for at least 5 minutes. I rolled down the passenger driver's side window and just inch in and listen to see if I can hear anyone out there, yet I hear nothing. I then realized in order for me to get to my home, I would have to move the tree. I told my son I was going to get out and move it just enough so we could get past and I would lock the doors. If anything happened, he could use my phone to call the neighbour who lived the closest. I darted out of my car and moved the tree slightly and raced back to the car. I was terrified. Luckily my son was on the ready to unlock the door for me to get back in. I drove up towards my home and we got in safely. No, I didn't sleep well that night. The next day I wake up to find the trees moved again. This time, a few feet behind my car. To this day I'm still baffled as to who could have done this or what their intentions were. Next time I'll be smarter and call the police. I do have another question that I can't answer. How did someone know where I put the tree after I cut it down? Whoever did this must have been watching me. I put the tree in the woods. That thought alone is enough to keep me up at night. I'm a 17-year-old male. My girlfriend is 18. And I live on around 150 acres of land in the south. Neighbours are scarce around here. My girlfriend had just finished her senior year of high school, and we'd been planning on spending the summer together since she'd be going college soon, and won't have as much free time. I woke up, then got a pot of coffee like I normally do. I turned on the news waiting for the brewing to finish. I began to feel uneasy, or a sense of foreboding. Something was off and I didn't know what. I finished off my cup of coffee, then hopping in my truck to go and get her. I wasn't exactly excited about going, as I had a bad back, and driving for 20 minutes was going to cause me a lot of discomfort and pain. Now you're probably asking, why she didn't just drive herself over to my house? Her car was old, having alternator issues. I finally get to her place, she gets her things, and we head back to my home. As I drive down along the long gravel path to my home, I begin to feel that something isn't right. We get back to my home and go inside and get her things situated. My mum had a day off work, so I decided it'd be nice to make us all a big breakfast. I fry up some bacon and eggs, biscuits and gravy. We finish up and my girlfriend and I decide we're gonna head back through the woods to part of the creek that had a small bank covered in sand. Now if you didn't know, the US is having a problem with feral hogs, so going into the woods without the gun's a bad idea. I grab the shotgun, some rounds, and we get going. As we're walking through the woods, the sense of dread comes back and is worse than before. I almost said we got back home. I wish I did. We get back to the beach, for lack of a better term. Hang around for a while before I say we should probably head home. As soon as I ended my sentence, we heard rustling in the distance and what sounded like snarling or snorting. No creature could make a sound like this. It sounded demented, deranged. We got our shit together and began speed walking back. The rustling and snarling get more frequent the further we walk. Keep in mind that we're walking through dense vegetation. I say probably 10 or 15 feet in front of her through the woods. About halfway back to my home, my girlfriend dropped her beach towels and reaches down to pick it up, and as soon as she does, a man comes sprinting at her full speed from the woods, grabbing her by the hair, snarling what sounded like a mixture of screaming and crying. I can't describe it. It paralyzed me. I was frozen for a split second. Before I continue, I need to describe what the guy looks like. He had long matte brown hair, looked as though he hadn't shaved in a week, and was wearing nothing but jeans that are ripped to hell. I'm 6'4" and 120 pounds, not really the most threatening looking guy. Now back to what I was saying. She started screaming for help. Now I carry a knife on me at all times. I've never actually thought about using it as a weapon. I didn't know if he had rabies or some other disease, so I slung my shotgun off my back and racked the side. If you don't know, just the sound of a shotgun slide can deter people, so that's my mindset. I don't have any rounds loaded or intention of loading any. The man turned around, looks at me with an evil, sadistic smile. For a split second, I thought he was gonna come after me. Thankfully he didn't. He ran back into the woods. I then grabbed my girlfriend and pretty much dragged her the rest of the way home, shotgun in the other hand ready to use. But when we get back to the home, I nearly bust down the door and slam it shut. She starts crying. My mum comes running out and says what happened. I explained everything and she's shocked. You may be asking if we call the police. The answer's no. My family never does that and we try and handle things on our own. We tried to get my girlfriend calmed down. After 30 minutes, she finally gets a grip on what had just happened. I tell her it's gonna be alright. We've never went in the woods again since, and are terrified of ever going out alone. When I was 13, my best friend and I used to steal metal dust caps off of cars, putting them onto our BMXs, because we thought it looked cool. We were just little toe rags back then, and I got used to being chased. So I was fast. My friend, however, was not. Sounds bad to say, but he was even overweight back then. I was the athletic one. Anyway, we would walk around local housing estates stealing dust caps. One night we were bored and decided to go looking for some. We walked up into the housing estate about 15 minutes from where we lived. This was a small estate, nearly fully surrounded by a large wooded area, popular with dog walkers. We get through the estate with no dust caps found, apart from one car at the top of the estate. As I bend down to unscrew the dust cap, I notice a man. Crap, he's looking at us. My friend watches and waits for us. He sees the man go back inside and wait at some bollards at a little pathway facing the woods. As we're leaning against these bollards trying to act normal, I heard the sound of branches breaking. I look up and saw a man's face staring at us from behind a tree at the front of the woods next to the path. I run as fast as I can on instinct before I had even warned my friend that somebody was there. I just assumed that he'd seen him as well. Anyway, I ran nearly all the way home, but where's my guy? I loiter around near his home. I'm getting worried now. I was really hoping that the guy wouldn't catch up with me. What do I do now? I can't just leave him. I had a slow walk back up near where we'd seen the guy, but I was terrified to go further in case he wanted to chase me or whatever. I decided I was going to go back through the estate and have a look around for him. No sign of him. Where's he gone? I'm terrified now. What if he's been dragged into the woods? I was thinking, I'm gonna have to go and tell his dad. This was my last port of call. As I was walking back, I see my friend fast walking home towards me. Where have you been? Getting these 2 for you and 2 for me. He had 4 skull ones in his hand. They're cool as hell. Did you not see the weird guy in the woods? Yeah. He wanted me to go over to him. He got really weird and started chasing me. Anyway, I ran and got these. So we head home and all is forgotten. Until years later, I move out from my parents' home into my own flat, but in the same estate as my parents. I used to suffer from insomnia. Not the only one. This was when I was around 20 or so. Not the only one. So I used to take my dog on long walks when I couldn't sleep. So one night at around 3 AM-ish, I get my coat and head out with my dog. I ended up walking to the top of this housing estate near where we went all those years ago. As I'm walking around the perimeter of the estate, the dog stops about 20 meters in front of me. I didn't pay much attention until I got closer. Hairs were standing up on the back of my neck. She starts growling, just at the woods. I stopped and got a strong smell of cigarettes as though somebody's right next to me. Needless to say, I sprinted out of there, and I've never walked that way again since. I'd been looking for a used road bike on Craigslist for some time now, and a good friend of mine linked me to an ad yesterday that was only 15 miles away and had the exact bike I was after for less than half of what I'd planned to spend. The guy had bought it, used it for half a year, broke his ankle in a freak accident, hadn't used the bike since. I was a little skeptical about the condition as it had supposedly sat for a while. With the photos he sent me, it looked great, so with that, I left for a test drive. I managed to secure this morning for a short 5-miler. I'd leave my truck in his driveway as a collateral. Morning almost passed me by when I slept through my first 2 alarms, only to be drugged from my sleep late by my very last one. I quickly realized what time it was, gathered my cash and my cycling clothes before running out of the door without pants on. I quickly threw a pair of shorts on, heading to my truck. Now, Craigslist can lead to some iffy characters, so I've always let someone know where I'm going. This time I texted my mum to give her a heads up. The drive's uneventful, except it put me in a real sketchy neighbourhood across the country. I was less than a mile from the country line, and I didn't really know the area that well, so I was glad that I'd left the extra time when I ended up getting lost. I wasn't truly lost. No one with a smartphone ever is, but I was close. Happily, I found the street within a couple of minutes, and I was pulling up beside the houses a couple of seconds later. Like I said, it's a pretty sketchy neighbourhood. I'm somewhat ashamed that I was prepared to tell the guy no if the bike looked stolen. The area looked really scary, and I had looked up a list of local stolen bikes on Craigslist in case the numbers matched. Now, after a couple of minutes in the driveway, the door suddenly opened and a huge bull mastiff came charging at me with no leash. My first instinct is to turn and run, and I damn near did. But I remembered from my sister-in-law, who's a veterinarian, that dogs are most adapted to actually chase people and bite them. So instead I stand my ground, making sounds, enough for the dog to actually turn and run. And this is the first experience I have of pulling up there. I don't know if the dog's going to come at me again, and I suddenly hear the door open and the owner stepping onto the porch. Now, if Pateron was big, this guy was bigger. He hadn't been sized properly when he brought his bike, because I'm 6 foot and a 56cm bike fits me like a glove. He's probably 6'7" or more. He's every bit of 300 pounds. He walks with a slight limp. I assume from the lingering effects of an ankle injury. Is carried as a Louisville slugger as he approaches me. The dog's linked away from him, beginning to cower in fear behind me, which I have to imagine is comical to see. Every fibre of me wanted me to jump in my truck and drive the hell away and never look back again, until he spoke. He had a higher tenor of a voice that was borderline comical, but actually fit him well. We got to talking a little bit, and I found out that he's a semi-professional singer. He loans his voice out to the local choirs who need someone to fill in a spot during performances, and has actually helped record several soundtracks for a small budget movie. He, much like his dog, was also a huge teddy bear, Shortly thereafter, the dog was greeting him, much like he greeted me. During our conversation, we actually came to the bike, and he talked about how he'd broken his ankle at work. Even with physical therapy, cycling just put too much strain on it. He was hoping to save for a small, above ground pool to help him work on his ankle. His house was split level, and he kept the bike in the basement, which attached to a garage. It was an odd setup, but seeing as how the house was built into the side of a hill, it does make sense, I guess. The basement, however, was something taken straight from the depths of the creepiest horror film I've ever seen. It has an old barber's chair, needles and syringes and small knives. I began to get worried when he must have saw the look in my face and explains that he runs his own small-time tattoo parlor when he has free time. He does piercings as well, but he doesn't have any of those on his person. He proceeds to show me the intricate work that he's done on both of his forearms, as he's wearing a long sleeve to begin with, and noted that he was completely ambidextrous. His work is amazing. He etched a flowing scene of colours, shapes along both of his arms, and it's still in progress. He even had an old computer and printer on the desk by the chair so that his friends could email him designs to check out. Once we enter the actual garage, things begin looking normal. There's an old beat up car, a couple of mountain bikes, an air compressor that appears to be from the 1950s. Finally, I saw a nearly new road bike leaning on the old car. It was in pristine shape, no visible scratches, and didn't have any chain or gear wear that I could see at least. I asked him if I was good to test ride it, and he responded with, "I already pumped up the tyres for ya." I left my truck in the driveway as promised and head out on a short 5-minute loop. I would take about 18 minutes or so. I was precise on timing, and I'd be right back. The bike handle shifted like a dream. Shifted cleanly and probably had a few miles on it. Both sets of gears worked as though they're purchased the next day. I was getting up speed far quicker than I did on my fitness bike. I was planning on doing a few really long rides in the coming weeks. This was certainly going to be a massive upgrade. I was really stoked and already purchased clip-in shoes and pedals, along with a spare tube in case I got flat. After less than a mile, I was ready to buy it. The remainder of the pavement was pure enjoyment. Halfway through, I could see a few high school boys gathering on the road ahead of me. It looked as though they're trying to get the tyres down to block the pathway. I wasn't really familiar with the neighbourhood and with the bike, so I decided to hop onto the grass to go around them. I was moving at a good clip, so I had to be careful. One of them threw something. I realised there's a car tyre rolling directly towards my path. I'm an experienced rider though, with a few thousand miles under my belt. I dodged the slow moving wheels with ease. The boys then chased after me on foot while I bolted for the house. I looked back a few seconds later and they're gone. I did however catch a glimpse of one of them as he blended into the trees, and then I was alone again. Every bend was a new point of terror. I didn't know if I'd run into them again or see them busting out of the woods randomly, so I stared just for a second. Can't see them at all. I decided to book it. I was pushing 25 miles per hour when I rounded the last bend and hopped into the driveway as quick as I could. But the man and the dog are nowhere to be seen. I don't see the kids either. I still wanted to buy the bike, so I slowly entered the garage and walked towards the basement, hoping to find him. Several tense minutes go by and there's no sign of him. If I were a dishonest person, I would have just taken the bike and left. I could have even left money for him, but I didn't want to be bait like that, and I'm not a thief, so I waited. I finally heard movement from within the house, so I climbed the wooden stairs to the main floor, tentatively knocking on the door. The movement within suddenly stopped and I heard some scrambling across the floor. I presumed that it was just a dog until the door opened a few seconds later and hits me. I jumped back down one step to avoid the door grabbing something. Looking ahead, I can see one of the boys from earlier at the top of the stairs. Several of them standing underneath, grabbing my ankles. One of them slowly walks past the counter desk with an iron in his hands. This was one of those times I'd love to say that I fought back and knocked several of the attackers out, before busting through the door calling the police, but no. I tried to run. I grabbed the railing and tried to shake my feet free. Fortunately, the railing wasn't as sturdy as it looked and gave out under me. At the first hint of my body weight, it came crashing down off the side of the stairs onto the concrete floor, head first. I black out. After an undermined period of time, I slowly come to, only to see that I had a dark hood over my head. Oddly, my head didn't hurt. I must have blacked out from the fall. I could feel that my hands were bound with rope as well. I could hear voices around me, asking me what they should do with me. Someone muttered, "Bury the last one," and a few people mumbled in agreement. I could see a little bit through the hood and make out half a dozen figures. The man and his dog are nowhere to be found. I hope they'll come back shortly. But I realised that he's in danger too. He may have already met his fate. I tried to remain as inconspicuous as possible and waited for the best opening I could get. I was planning on sprinting back out the main garage door into my truck. I kept a spare key in the lining of the driver's seat. It's not an expensive truck, so I'd never been worried about having it stolen. The kids could have kept my wallet, keys and phone. I'd happily trade them for my safety. I saw a few of them digging through a tool chest and bringing out tools that made metallic clanging sounds. Now this honestly gave me goosebumps. Ready as I was to run, there's always something that can go wrong. At that exact moment, the guy comes home. Maybe he'd gone to look for me. Maybe he'd tried to follow me in another car and make sure I didn't steal the bike. I don't know. But he was walking off into the garage at that exact moment. The boys all stopped talking abruptly, looking up at him. I thought he was going to start swinging. He says, "Oh good, you got him." I couldn't find him. Didn't want him to get away or anything. My heart sank. The dog's nowhere to be found. But I had to imagine that she'd chase me if I made a run for it. I'd still try though. This might be the only chance I get. I saw the man moving behind a wall in the garage and I took my chance, bolted my feet and was all the way to the garage before I heard the first kid exclaim that I'd moved. Then the guy was right there. I couldn't see and didn't have a chance to get my hands free. Then the man's right in my face. He moved so quick for someone so large. I didn't stand a chance. His bare paw-sized hands grabbed me by the shoulders saying, "Where are you going?" as I shake my head in fear. He sat me down, strapped my arms and legs to the cold metal. It was then I realised that there's a halo above the chair, eerily resembling an electric chair. I can hear the dull hum of high voltage electricity nearby. As if he realised that I noticed that, he nodded and pointed to a large breaker built into the wall. "That's it, I'm gonna die." Suddenly, A guy comes in really close and says, "We're just joking with you." And they all burst out laughing, saying, "We scared the hell out of you." Now, these are people that I've never met before, and I still have no idea what's happening or if this is a mind game. I stand up and bolt for my truck. I managed to get in and slam it into gear. I drove away and never went on Craigslist again since.
My bedroom looked bare, so I thought, why not buy a lamp to make it look more cozy and nice? After everything that's happened, I honestly would have just kept my bedroom the same. I'm just an ordinary person. I work, go to university, and keep up with my social life. I never really thought something bad could happen from buying a lamp. It was cheap, the glass was rose gold. It was really pretty and at a good price, so I thought, why not? The first day I brought the lamp, I unpacked it from its packing and placed it in my room in the corner near my chair. I turned it on, admiring it illuminated all around my room. It was pretty late, so most of my lights in my house were turned off. I heard my closet door open as I turned around to exit my room. I'm a strong believer in the paranormal, but I didn't feel any dread or evil. I just felt normal, like nothing was wrong. I walked to my closet and closed the door fully, and walked out my room, not turning back. But I'm sure I heard my closet door open again. I had a few friends around for a girly night in. My friend Katie needed to use the restroom. I moved into my house recently, so she didn't know where anything was. I directed her to the bathroom and carried on talking to my other friends. 20 minutes later, she's still not back, and I go back to check if she's okay. I go up to the bathroom and she's not in there. I search the guest room and she's not in there, so I check in my room and she's in there, staring at the lamp. She was literally on the floor staring at it. I found it pretty weird, but she was probably really drunk. I think everyone was except for me. I walked in and asked her what she was doing. She ignored me at first until I nudged her. Then she just snapped out of whatever she was doing, stood up and walked back downstairs and acted like nothing happened. Before I carry on, I think I should mention some things. I've just turned 20, I'm engaged, and I'm also expecting my first child. Me and my fiance Dan recently moved to Europe and bought a cottage. If you've read my previous post about the cottage, then you'll know that I was having problems. Anyway, that's it, and I'll carry on now. So anyway, the next morning Dan asked me if I'd forgotten to turn the lamp off last night. I distinctly remember going to sleep in the dark, but obviously I must have forgotten. Weird things like that happened for a while, but then we started seeing things. Like then the lamp was on and we'd see dancing figures on the ceiling. Even when we were standing perfectly still, they would still be moving, or there would be a figure on the wall just standing there. It wouldn't be our shadows because we would be in a completely different place, and it wouldn't make any sense. One night I was sitting up in bed on the iPad while Dan was in the ensuite. I can't remember exactly what we were talking about. I think it was something to do with his friends, I'm not sure. I noticed the shadow just standing there. I watched it for a good 5 minutes, then it moved. But it didn't move on the wall. It's like it was walking towards me. I was so engrossed I didn't call for help. I turned to Dan in disbelief, but he was just frozen. We could hear heavy breathing. It reached the bed and then just disappeared. The floor was still creaking. I can't remember much of what happened next, but I do remember seeing a hand peer out from under the bed. It was bony and black. It was clawing its way out. And then I saw Dan running over to the lamp. He picked it up and smashed it against the wall, and then we were there in the dark. This happened last week. Nothing else has happened so far. I don't think the lamp was the problem. Please, if you do see a cheap lamp on Craigslist, no matter how beautiful it is, do not buy it.
I had to buy a new car off of Craigslist. There was an elderly gentleman that was getting rid of his old daily driver. He said he loved the thing, but never got to use it, and he was far too old to be driving around anymore. He seemed normal enough when I spoke to him on the phone. So, off I headed. As I was driving, I get a text message from him saying, "Oh, I've left the keys under the door, just let yourself in. I might be asleep, so you'll have to wake me up." Weird, yes I know, but at the time I wasn't really thinking of it and more concentrating on driving. When I arrived to the location, it's truly in the middle of nowhere. The sounds of nature are everywhere, yes, but people? No. It's one of the oldest houses I've ever seen, looking like dropping a match on it could let the whole thing go up in flames. Kinda hard to describe, but literally like something straight out of a horror flick. So I pull up to his driveway. There's no sign of him. He must be asleep. I guess that's where he's old. I look at my phone again and he says, "I'm just inside, just come let yourself in. Just make sure you check under the mat for the key." Now I get a weird feeling about this. I go to the mat anyway, and when I lift it up, there's just a piece of paper. I didn't think there was actually words on it at first, but upon closer inspection, in really bad handwriting it says, "You better start running." Needless to say, I noped it the hell out of there. I bolt back to my truck without even looking back. I speed away from the driveway, and as I look in the rearview mirror, I can see multiple people coming out from the surrounding trees, all in black. I have never been on Craigslist since and still have some PTSD to this day about going to unknown locations.
Last year, when I was moving from my apartment to my house, I dropped my box with my laptop and it was damaged beyond repair. I definitely didn't have the money for a new one, so I went on Craigslist to find a cheap deal. After hours of searching for one that was decent and affordable, I found a Windows 10 for only $25. I was astonished and emailed the owner right away in hopes it hadn't been brought at such a good deal. I was in good luck because they miraculously hadn't sold it yet. I was ecstatic and went to pick it up. I asked the man why he was selling it for so cheap, and he said his sister had recently passed away and they were cleaning out her house, so they were selling different things from her house. It didn't creep me out too much that I was using a dead person's computer, but I felt weird that they were giving up her belongings so quickly. I brought the computer home and was excited to use it, so I plugged it in right away and it started loading after a minute. It was crazy. The computer was in perfect condition, not even a scratch, and was loading surprisingly fast. When it started up, the background popped up and it was a pitch black screen with 3 letters that read EMX. I didn't know what it meant, but I suppose she had worked for an obscure company. I wondered if she cleared off the files from her computer, and being the nosy person I was, checked the On This PC tab for files. I didn't find anything at all until I checked the Documents tab. There were just 3 items there. The first item read, Case 322 Experiment. I clicked the first open, and it came up a summary of the little experiment of Case 322.
Case 322. Notes. Case suffers severe schizophrenia and depression, and experiences frequent hallucinations and paralysis. We will be experimenting with treatments for her unique and unusual case. It should be noted that this case is extremely violent, has been speculated at the most violent of all cases. Constant murder and torture threats, surprising detail, and graphic descriptions for someone as young as her.
That was the end of the item. I was horrified by the fact that it appeared they'd given me a computer formerly used for children's neurology experiments. Being the curious person I was though, I decided to keep reading on. The biggest mistake of my life. The second item read,
Safety/concern. Forewarn.
I opened the file and it appeared to be a list.
Safety concerns with Case 322. It should be noted that those children for experimentation on Case 322 shall be the utmost high standards, and serious precautions must be taken. Case 322 has been involved in the following acts. 1. The murder of her entire family. 2. The murder of 4 civilians during an escape from her home. 3. Bank robberies. 4. Over 200 death threats towards figures of authority. Police, guards, doctors, therapists, teachers, school staff and others. 5. writing a death note to a classmate. 6. Pulling out her own hair from her roots and eating it. 7. Pulling her teeth out and stabbing herself in the eye with it. 8. Over 20 suicide attempts including hanging, overdose of drugs, self-inflicting shots with a firearm, jumping off the top of a building and stabbing herself. 9. Attacking a police officer and nearly killing them. As expected, this is not the full list of offences, but are the most prominent. When conducting experiments, do not leave Case unattended and do not take your eyes off her. Keep eyes to experimentation room out of her parameters and make sure she's restrained in a straitjacket through the whole process. Have guards on duty at all times for experimentation.
And that was the end of the file. I then understood they weren't dealing with a normal messed up kid. They were dealing with a serial killer, a psychopath. I was sick to my stomach at this point. Why did this woman have such private matters on her at-home computer? How did her family not know about this? Why was she dead? The third file read,
Experimentation, documentation. Day 1. Case 322 fought and screamed until she sedated. She is surprisingly strong for her stature, and being only 14. Experiments went on, not much progress. Day 2. Case 322 stabbed a guard in the eye with a bobby pin. Case is no longer allowed utilities. Cases have head shaved to prevent it being used as a noose. After proper sedation, we found a serious neurological phenomenon in her brain, most likely the cause of her issues. Day 3. Case 322 woke up from sedation during experiments and played asleep as she slowly attempted to escape from the strain. Patients sprung up in the middle of the experiment, tackled a doctor and broke their hip bone before being restrained by the guards. Doctor to receive compensation. Sedation will be amped up several milligrams and restraining methods are to be more advanced. Day 4. 2 guards and a nurse were killed in an escape. Building was put on lockdown. Case was found hiding in a cleaning closet. Day 5. Experiments are becoming increasingly more dangerous for a team. We're debating the end of the experiment for safety reasons. Case 322 is by far the most severely, and please excuse my improper tone, messed up and psychotic case ever speculated by our team. Day 6. Case 322 is no longer allowed fingernails. Day 7. I know I'm about to die, but if I'm gonna die, I'm gonna make sure these last few things are documented. She killed the rest of the team, and I'm hiding in my locked office, but she's close. I can hear her footsteps. We never figured out how to treat this phenomenon. This is rarely ever, possibly never said in this field, but this case is absolutely helpless. There is no cure. She's a lost cause. She's picking the lock right now. If my family ever finds this, I love you guys. And Case 322 is out there somewhere. She's in Goodbye World. This is Case 322. Well, that's just what they call me. I killed this piece of trash. Bleach blonde waste of life. She's dead. If her family's reading this, I enjoyed banging her head against the desk until she died. I love watching the life drain from my victims. And good luck ever finding me. I'm dropping her laptop off at her house so they can't use it for evidence. I know where she lives, and I'll find you too.
and then it ended. I shut off the computer and went straight back into the man's house. I asked him how his sister died. He seemed to be taken aback by the question, but answered saying she was murdered. I gave him the computer and showed him the files. We turned it into the police station, and there's been an ongoing search ever since. Everyone in the area is told to keep their doors locked at all times. Keep on lookout for the girl. She's out there somewhere. They still haven't found her. I still have no clue what EMX is. The only thing that really still keeps me paranoid is the ending. And I'll find you too. Honestly, based on the description of how crazy she is, I can't tell you I don't believe her.
If there's one piece of advice I can give anyone, it's don't take the cheap way out, no matter how good it seems. Something about that decision will bite you. You might be lucky, it may only be a mosquito bite, but if you're not, it could be a great white shark bite. For me, I wasn't so lucky. Obviously, I wouldn't be writing to you today. A couple of months ago, I got in a very bad accident. It was so bad that my car got totaled almost beyond recognition. My insurance company gave me a decent amount of money for it, but money was tight for me. I needed a car fast. I went to the place everyone goes looking for a good deal, Craigslist. For a day, I kept looking for a deal I couldn't say no to. I needed a decent running car for cheap, that's also reliable. All the sellers at the time were asking for fair prices, too fair for me to get them. I was about to give up one night when I come across a deal I couldn't say no to. The guy Robert was selling a 2001 Camry with 100,000 miles on it, claiming it'd run smoothly for a good price. I contacted Robert and he told me I could test drive it the next day. I took a taxi out there and gave the car a good old drive. Let me tell you, it ran like it was brand new. No complaints with the car whatsoever. I was really impressed. It seemed almost too good to be true. So when I got back, I asked the dealer what was wrong with the car. No matter how hard I pushed, he said there was nothing wrong with it. He seemed genuine about it the entire time too. So I believed him, buying it on the spot. I had the car for about a month without incident. Then one night, I was driving home from a long day of work. It was about 1 a.m, so as you can imagine, the roads were desolate. I'm smoking a cigarette with my windows down, listening to the wind fly into my car. I remembered being stopped at red lights when a chill ran down my spine. This made me uneasy, but I blew it off as exhaustion. The light turns green. I begin to accelerate. Then something or someone whispers into my ear, ever so slightly. The sound of the engine mixed with the wind made it almost inaudible. There were no cars around, so I slammed my brakes, bringing my car to a complete stop. I waited a couple of seconds for maybe another whisper or anything, but no, nothing. No incident occurred for the rest of the ride. The next 2 weeks went by without anything like it happening again. I mean, honestly, I almost completely forgot about it. That's until something happened again. It was pouring rain while I was at work. It was very slow, so my boss lets me smoke a cigarette in my car. When I get in my car, I got the same chill once again. Instantly, I remember my last experience sat in there. I'm now in complete silence, waiting for something to happen. About 30 seconds later, my car got filled with the smell of freshly shot fireworks. It got so bad, so quick it made me cough like crazy, gagging even. I got out of my car, running back inside. The look on my face must have been far from normal, because my boss comes up to make sure everything's alright. I told him about the smell, and he said the only thing he could think of was somebody messing with my car. We went out to check out what was wrong, but the smell was gone. He said he's going to check the cameras, but he never found anything. I tried to blow it off again, but this time I couldn't find a reasonable explanation. After an hour straight of thinking about what could have happened, I tried to give Robert a call. Sadly, this guy had the nerve to cancel his phone. About a week later, I just got into an apartment to deliver a pizza. It's going pretty routine. The guy's cool, gave me a nice tip. I even had a good conversation with him. As I was about to wrap things up and head out, I noticed something that caught my attention in the parking lot. "Hey, you drove that Camry here, right?" he said. "Yeah, Why? I think there's someone in your car. I look in my car and sure enough, I see a girl sitting in shotgun. She had black hair, was very pale, wearing a dress. Crap, call the cops. For a few seconds I thought, I wasn't crazy, and I finally got the person messing with me. Sadly, this wasn't the case. When I was on the 3rd floor, the girl was looking forward while I faced her side. I lost sight of her going down the stairs to the 2nd floor, but saw her again as I got down, and let me tell you, I nearly fainted. She was staring directly at me with a smile from ear to ear. But that's not the worst part. Her eyes were something else. They looked kind of blue but almost black around the outside, something I've never seen before. I was mesmerized and terrified. The next thing I know, I feel a tap on my shoulder, breaking my trance. It was a guy I delivered the pizza to, informing me that the police are on their way. He said to me, "Why was I standing there?" I explained, looked back, but the girl's gone. The police ended up coming. We filed the report and they did a quick search through my car to see if there's any signs of a break-in. Sadly, there's none. Everything's in place exactly as I left it. The police said they would check the cameras and inform me if they see anything, but they never spoke to me. Over the next couple of weeks, I would hear the damn whispering again, but only when my car or something in my environment made a loud noise. At first it was occasional, but by the 2nd week, it was there almost every loud sound. I could also make out separate voices now, one of a man and one of a woman. I still couldn't understand what they were saying. That was until I was on my way home tonight. A few minutes from my house, I got a chill again. I knew it was coming. This time, I heard it so clear. It's your turn now. I felt ice cold breath running down my neck. In my peripheral vision, I could see her reflection in my rearview mirror waiting for me to turn and look. She kept whispering them damn words in my ears, almost creating a thick layer of ice on my neck. The longer she whispered, the more it felt as though I was being pulled into her influence. Finally, I got home, ran inside, locked myself in my room. But I'm starting to think I was making a mistake. If I were to look out my window, I could see my car and hear the whispering again. There's 2 girls and 1 guy. They kept telling me to look at the car just one more time, really quick. Maybe I should look. I mean, what's the worst that's going to happen to me? This happened 6 years ago. I was about 12. My brother was 26 at the time. My brother had been serving in the US Army for several years when this happened, and was deploying to the Middle East on his 2nd deployment if I remember correctly. Also of note was that he's a Green Beret and had recently completed the Army Special Forces qualification course. And by then, was an active duty SF engineer sergeant. Given that we'd both grown up with a passion for the outdoors, he thought it'd be nice to take me on a backpacking trip in northern Alabama before he left for 9 months. The trip had gone smoothly up until the 3rd night we were camping out. Around 8 PM, we had our camp set up, eaten dinner, and were sitting by the fire talking about typical gun stuff, girls, etc. For reference, our spot was about 50 yards from a large stream, and about 50 yards downhill adjacent to the large path. Our camp, the stream, and the path formed a kind of triangle. This was summertime in Alabama, so it wasn't quite dark yet when two guys, who appeared to be in their late 20s, wandered up, asking if we'd seen any hogs while hiking. Given that this is rural Alabama, we had seen some further into the wilderness and told them so. Even though they were relatively polite, I got a seriously creepy vibe from them dirty clothes, greasy hair, bad facial hair, etc. I think they probably looked as though they belonged in the movie Deliverance. They kind of hung out for a few minutes, maybe a little longer than they should have, looking around, asking us questions like, how long have we been out here? How long are we staying? And just kind of sizing us up. They then abruptly said goodbye and walk away. I didn't necessarily feel threatened by them, and I know for sure my brother didn't, but I still felt uneasy about the whole thing. Fast forward 3 or 4 hours, my brother and I had gone to sleep and were nestled in our tent when I was awoken by the sound of multiple dogs barking. I've always been a heavy sleeper, and they sound as though they're only 100 yards away. My heart immediately starts pounding, and I kicked my brother through my sleeping bag and asked if he was awake or heard the dogs. He responded, "I'm awake. They've been getting closer for the past hour or so just lay still." Needless to say, I'm terrified. We would also hear sporadic shouts from several different sources, but neither came any closer. A few minutes later, my brother whispered, "They're hunting for dogs." Don't worry, they're just hunting for hogs. They use the dogs to pin them down before they shoot them. This gave me some relief, but not too much. Somehow I managed to fall asleep again. The fact that they were doing this during night time was a huge red flag to me. Fast forward what was probably another 3 hours, around 2 AM. I managed to sleep pretty well after hearing the first hog hunters when I woke up to my brother squeezing my hand firmly saying, "Wake up, put on your shoes and follow me, be quick." My heart immediately went back to racing because I heard the dogs and voices in the distance, further away than before but very distinct. Not asking any questions, I did what he said, and as soon as we're out of the tent, he says get back. We snuck about 50 yards into the woods, towards the junction of the path and the stream, crawled into the bushes. It was up a hill, so we had a pretty good elevated view of the campsite. I remembered as we're laying there how loudly I was breathing and how quietly he was when I heard a very distinct sound of a pistol slide rack in. I look over to my brother and his hand pistol, and he was watching the campsite and surrounding area. I begin whispering to him, and he puts his hand over my mouth and points at the campsite. The group of hunters have been steadily approaching our campsite by this time, and have now reached it. This is over the course of 30 minutes. There were 5 of them, and like 3 or 4 dogs, they all looked crazy, and are relatively young with either rifles or shotguns. For those of you who are backpackers and campers, you know nobody comes up on a random camp in the middle of the night with dogs and guns that has good intentions. I knew this, and so does my brother. I was freaking out, and so was my brother. Now they lingered for maybe 20 minutes, shining flashlights around, talking to themselves, when my brother put his mouth to my ear and said, "If they come towards us, I want you to run as quickly as you can. Don't stop, don't look back, stay off the trail, and look for flashing lights." I knew I could make it back because he had taught me the land nav pretty well. He then handed me a flashlight and told me not to take the red filter off. He told me later that the red filter helps preserve night vision, cutting down ambient light so it's harder for someone to see you from a distance. By now, I was so scared I started crying, but at the same time, I had a rush of adrenaline and what I think now was confidence that he thought I could handle myself. We lay there for a while longer when out of nowhere they start screaming, "Where are you all at?" firing at random in the woods. My brother dragged me back behind the crest of the hill, throwing himself on top of me. Thankfully our position on top of the hill is protected from any gunfire. They shot maybe 6 or 7 times, then started walking in the direction they come from. They got maybe 100 yards away when I heard a blaring siren, seeing emergency lights flashing through the woods. Turns out, my brother called the forest services on a satellite phone, and my family had it for emergency services, and had actually sent out to the forest services and game wardens to our area of the wilderness. The wilderness is about 25,000 acres across, so it took them a while to get there on the dirt roads. When we saw the game warden truck, my brother signalled them with the light and pointed them in the direction that the hunters had gone, and the other guy had sped off through the woods. As soon as they're all gone, we went back to our camp, packed up our stuff and waited by the path for the game warden to come back, who then gave us a ride in his truck. On the drive back, my brother told me how brave I'd been and that we couldn't talk about it to our parents the next day if I wanted to. I asked him not to do that because I know they'd never let us go camping again. When I was about 18, me and some friends took a trip about 7 hours or so down to the Appalachian National Forest near Tallahassee, Florida. We were going to do a little car camping, drink a few ice cold natty lights. As such, we didn't want to get bothered by any park rangers, so we drive way deeper into the woods. We get there, set up camp. Had said natty lights, and me and a guy decide to do some exploring. So we walk about 100 yards from our campsite to the main road. We see another path directly across from us and start walking. Immediately, we started seeing signs that someone had lived there for a while. Big bags of trash, stuff like that. Shouldn't have been a huge red flag to turn around, but, you know, we're young, nothing can hurt us. So eventually we get to the campsite of an older white guy living out of his van. Clothing lines strung up, coolers placed around it, and a big gorgeous dog. I think it's maybe a golden retriever. We tried to back out, but he sees us and begins talking. He's friendly enough, asking where we're from, tells us some cool spots to check out in the park. We end up chatting to him for about 10 minutes and go on our way. I kept thinking to myself how odd it was that he gave directions in steps, not in yards or miles. The guy always seemed off balance too, not drunk, like he's on a balancing beam or something, swaying a lot. And he was super excited to talk about national parks and forests where we're from. Okay, camping part over, we go back to our tents. Now fast forward 2 months, somebody calls me last night and tells me to turn the TV on. I oblige. I then see an old dude in a van. You see where I'm heading with this. I get annoyed at my friend and say, "Why'd you wake me up for this?" He says, "No, watch." And I see the golden retriever and it all clicks. What the hell? The guy's name is Gary Mitchell Hilton, convicted of at least 4 murders. He kidnaps and murders a girl on Blood MTGA, an older couple, and a girl in the Appalachian, not far away from where we saw him. Obviously we called the cops and they put us in touch with the FBI, and we get flown down to take investigators to the campsite. We point out every spot we saw anything in, tell them exactly what happened, show them the places he describes to us. Now I didn't think anything would come out until after the trial, but apparently they found what appeared to be partially destroyed human finger bones in and around the campsite. My family used to camp in Alcuin Park in Ontario when I was a kid. We used to do a lot of day hikes with our dog. Now the dog was a crazy runner and would run up and down the trail, back and forth between my parents, brother and I. This one trail ended at a lookout. My brother and I stepped to try and take in the view. My dog arrived a minute later, travelling at full speed. He attempted to apply the brakes, but the momentum carries him over the edge. We freak out thinking that our dog's gone off a cliff with maybe a 70-foot drop. I ventured over to the edge to look, and my dog somehow landed on a ledge which is only 10 feet down. Now what? Any movement and my dog's gonna fall the rest of the way down. It's a sheer face drop with no way to get there. And out of the blue appears a hiker with full climbing gear. Now this area is not known for a lot of climbing, and I've never seen anything like it before. The guy goes down, rescues the dog. Now he's right next to us and we go to look at our dog, turn back to say thank you, and he's literally vanished. He doesn't even say a word to us. This happened to me some time ago, back when I was 10, on a school field trip to a group of cabins some 70 kilometers or so away from the city I lived in. The point of the trip was basically to have fun. We weren't being taught much other than how to make shelters and light a fire in rain. For the most part, we're supposed to spend the majority of the time just fooling around, playing tag and swimming in the nearby lake, and maybe playing board games inside the cabins when it's pouring. Things turned out to be less than fun. At first it seemed to be a great trip. We got to choose our roommates, and my group of friends and I obviously chose one together. So there's 4 of us. Myself, an Indian guy, Canadian and Chinese. Neither of us had ever been on a trip like this before. So far from home in the middle of the mountainous terrain. When we got there, we took a tour which was led by the camp's coordinator. This 20-something-year-old with blonde shoulder-length hair. He shows us the cabins, the lake, the trails, and the kitchen/lunchrooms, and then stressed to us that it's so important not to wander far from the cabins, since being in a forest at the base of a mountain, the chances of getting lost are relatively high. So we finished the tour, ate dinner, and then were guided to bed. As we had arrived somewhat late, my friends and I are extremely excited, with this being our first time sleeping away from home and everything. The Canadian friend had the seemingly brilliant idea to share ghost stories while we got ready for bed. We each come up with a fictional character that will creep out kids or murder people or something. I came up with this idea of someone called Psycho, who would hide behind the shower curtains and then stab you when you stepped inside. Another guy come up with the typical monster under the bed that grabs you, dragging you under the bed. As the hour passed, the lights out drew closer. We started to get the creeps. By the time lights out hit, the next 2 hours were so high-strung with a combination of excitement and nerves that everyone, excluding me, decided to share one bed, even though there's 2 of them. The guy's story about being dragged under the bed unnerved us to the point that we jumped onto the beds from nearby pieces of furniture rather than walk near the bottoms. As I previously mentioned, I decided to sleep on my own because 3 people in one bed was awkward and it's hot. We talked for a bit before turning off the lights and falling asleep, but I was awoken some hours later by what sounds like whispering. I didn't move at first, since the stories we had shared while getting ready for bed were still on my mind. Then I recognized the voices and realized my friends were the ones whispering from over the other side of the room in their bed. So I relaxed for a moment and was about to call out and ask what they were doing when someone hissed to me, "What is it doing?" Immediately I thought of some monster looming over my bed. I freeze, eyes darting around in the darkness. I didn't see anything, as the room was empty, and it's just too dark to be able to really see anything. I'm now starting to panic a little bit. Someone else speaks. It was looking at him, said the Chinese guy, then adding, "Do you think it'll break the window?" And then I look at the window. It was one of those floor-to-ceiling ones with the latch that opens up to the balcony. Standing up to the balcony, pressed against the glass, was a silhouette of a person. The curtains were drawn, but they were white and thin, and we could see the wrapped shadow of a person, illuminated from the dim moonlight. The man was holding a long pole with a wide end, similar to a sledgehammer or axe. "Guys?" I whispered. The man outside didn't move, but the Chinese guy did. I don't even know how he worked up the courage to do this, but he crawled out of bed and slowly worked his way to the side of the window, ducked down low, all commando style. He reaches forward, grabbing the curtains, and was about to peek between the fabric when the man outside knocks on the glass. The poor Chinese guy jumps up so badly that he pulled on the curtain, causing the entire thing to rip off the railing, letting us see the person outside. He was dressed in black, aside from a pair of orange shorts, having a ski mask on. What he held in his hands was actually a shovel, rather than a hammer or axe. Nevertheless, the 4 of us were terrified. The Chinese guy screamed and bolted for the door in less than a second. The 4 of us were scrambling out of bed and hightailing it for the exit. screaming all the while. The Indian guy trips along the way. The Chinese guy is in such a rush that he slams into the door, causing the lock to nearly snap. In seconds, we're in the cabin's lobby. Everyone's rushing out of their room trying to say what happened. A teacher goes out to try and investigate, but found nothing. The person's disappeared. After that, it took an hour before we were convinced enough that we could even step back in our room. I clamber into bed with my friends, despite their protest, and we stay awake for the remainder of the 4 hours or so, hands clutching our flashlights and the curtains open. The next day passes normally, and we thought that we talked about the event and that everything would be forgotten about soon. We eat lunch, eat dinner, and then with a small sense of dread walk back to the cabins ready for nighttime. The same guy came back, but to a different cabin this time. When we wake up, and we get herded into the breakfast hall, and there's a group of girls talking about the man with the shovel. We soon realised that I'd seen the same person. Now nothing else happened after this. At the time we were freaked out. Looking back on it now, I know that that guy was really messed up, whoever it was, and I'm glad that nothing further come of it, and that they couldn't actually get inside to us. No, I'm not a camper or ranger, but an archaeologist. A few years back, we're doing a massive survey in the middle of nowhere in the interior of BC. All the crew had gone home. It's just my boss and myself left for a few days to follow up and confirm some coordinates and finish off some mapping. We head out from our motel an hour or so into the bush. Middle of nowhere along deactivated login roads. The closest town is miles and miles away. We hike out to this one area we had found a couple of weeks previously. For some reason the whole area felt off, so we get down to business, and about 15 minutes after being hunched over mapping, there's a really weird deafening whomp sound. I could feel the pressure in my ears change. I immediately look at my boss 20 feet away, and he's white as a ghost staring back at me. It happens again. I feel the pressure in my chest now. There's chills all over my body. Every hair is standing on end. My boss just turns and looks at me and says, "Let's go." We grab all our stuff and speed hike back to the truck. We never discussed it since. I have no clue what it was, but I've never been so freaked out in my life. Even 10 years later, it still terrifies me to this day.